Welcome to the Discovering Leadership podcast. My name's Corbin Hannis, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-host Carl Bowden from Exemplify. Carl, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so today on the Discovering Leadership podcast, we're talking about how do you leave a legacy? So, this is going to be the last episode in the Authenticity and Serving Others series. But before we go into that episode, what is the purpose of the Discovering Leadership podcast? Now, if you guys have been listening over the past episodes, you know that it is to invest in leaders. We want to build a community of leaders to help multiply the influence around us. We want to invest in you and to help you understand the fundamentals of leadership, how to build relationships, how to craft strategy in your business, in your personal life, in your community. And then we also want you to live to your true, authentic self. So, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about leaving your legacy. So, how to be consistent with your mission. How do you do that when you plan for a legacy? And how do you be adaptable over the years? How do you invest in your people to create lasting success? What's it going to take to invest in your people to have the right things in place to leave a lasting legacy? And then creating a vision for the future. What's going to be happening after you're gone? So today we are joined by Rob Exline. Rob is the owner and CEO of Exline Inc. Rob has been with Exline since April 1991 and is the fifth generation of the Exline family to serve as the company CEO since 1994. Prior to joining Exline, he began his professional career in 1980 with Trane Co as sales engineer. In 1986, joined Environmental Control Systems as manager of business development, and in 1988 joined Porter McCleod Constructions as division manager. Rob graduated from Kansas State University with a bachelor's degree in both mechanical engineering and business administration. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Appreciate being here.
Well, thanks for being here, Rob. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing at Xline Inc.
Sure. We're kind of picking off of the bio you just gave on me. You're right. I went to Kansas State. Really spent my younger days in education with the full intention of joining Exline right out of college. At that time, my dad and two uncles owned and ran the business. And when I was about a junior in college, my dad came and said, "Rob, we're not ready for you yet. We'd like you to go out and uh, work elsewhere, gain some outside experience. And then sometime down the road, if you still have interest, we'll talk to you about coming back." So that was probably one of the best things they could have ever done for me. I think growing up in the family business, watching it and everything, you kind of get, tunnel vision on who you are, what the company is. So to be able to go out and work elsewhere before I came back, I gained a lot of knowledge, experience there that I could bring back to the company. So I think I brought some good value when I came back. There was a time that I didn't think I would come back to the company. I was having a lot of success in my own career. I started out in Denver, Colorado as a sales engineer, as you mentioned, ultimately moved to the Los Angeles area. And I ran a division of a general contractor out of Denver. I ran their Southern California operation. So learned a lot doing business in Southern California. It's a different culture out there, but I think I really benefited. Xline Incorporated does business all over the country and some international. So I think that helped me a lot. But 11 years had passed since I had graduated. And my dad and uncles were really trying to figure out what was the succession plan for Exline Incorporated. And I, being the oldest of the fifth generation, had really, like I mentioned before, kind of prepared myself to join the company, from a degree standpoint, and the kind of work that I had done outside of the company. They finally approached me while I was in California, said, "Are you ever coming back?" And because 11 years had passed. And so at that time, I really thought I was well on my own way there, but started talking to them, talked about the business, the condition that it was in, kind of where it was headed. Um, the idea of maybe moving back to Kansas from California actually felt pretty good. I was kind of excited about that. Had just met my wife at the time, and I think she was ready for a change. So flew back to Salina, met with the attorneys and the accountants, and ended up making the decision to come back to Salina and take over the business. So my dad and uncles, all three shared an equal ownership in the business at that time. My dad was president, and then one uncle was secretary of the company. They were both vice presidents, one secretary, one treasurer. Anyhow, the plan was for me to come back, and then in about a 10-year period, I would end up owning about 25% of the business, which at that time was intriguing enough to me to get my wife and I to move back and join the business. So I came back in 91, and the company was actually struggling somewhat at that time. In fact, so I got here in 91, and in 1992, we had a really tough year financially. So I was brand new, had just come back. Um, and just to kind of give you some numbers, they had negative income of almost 10% of revenues at that time. And they were fairly leveraged at that time as well. So the banks were getting a little bit antsy. We had owned a farm that belonged in our family for a number of generations. And they ended up having to sell the family farm to generate some cash, to get some working capital to keep things going. But I kept telling him, I said, we are a very viable business. It was just their approach that they were using that really was causing issues. They became very operational oriented, not market driven. So they were looking internally at their operations and what they would have to charge customers to cover their costs. And as their costs went up, they raised their prices. And as their prices went up, business started to drop off. And so, anyway, I came back at an interesting time, but I was young, um, had a lot of great ideas, and started to implement things. So that was 91. And by mid 1993, which is just, a couple years later, my dad and uncles said, okay, this kid he's got it figured out. He knows what he's doing. We got to get out of the way. They were in their upper 50s, lower 60s. So in January of 94, all three of them retired the same day. And we put an
Mm.
arrangement together. I ended up buying the whole business from them, um, and took over. And they just got out of the way, and I've taken it, and we've seen significant growth. I think maybe we've had 1 year in the last 30 years where we actually didn't make a profit. Um, so it's been a good run for me. So it's kind of my story and how I came back to the business, and I've had a lot of fun. It's been great.
Yeah. Wow. That's an amazing story. And thank you so much for sharing all that, Rob. One thing that stuck out to me that I appreciated is that your dad and your uncles let you make the decision for yourself. It's not like, they forced you to do anything, but they had you make your own decision, and they kind of guided you in the process, and they saw the potential in you,
Yeah.
which I think is huge in leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really appreciated how they handled it. And I thought the process went real well. And when I came back, I was fully committed and excited about the opportunity. So, and to carry on the tradition of the family business, you better be excited and want to keep it going, or it usually doesn't work out very well. So,
Yeah,
handing off from one generation to the next.
Oh,
exactly.
that makes a lot of sense. And, again, Rob, thank you for sharing your story and giving us all the opportunity to learn more about you and your history, how you got to where you're at now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the history and the story of Xline Inc., the business, and the legacy that's been passed down from generation to generation over time?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. We're very proud of going into the actually sixth generation right now. My son has joined the company, and we're working towards that. So back in the 1870s, my great great grandfather was a blacksmith, and he started out in Ohio and was ready for a change. And he had recently gotten married, and I don't know what motivated them to want to come west. But he had identified Kansas as a place he wanted to be. So he came out and remember, this is in the 1870s. Just
Yeah.
traveling alone wasn't that easy to do. But anyhow, he came, looked around the area, and they decided they thought this was going to be the perfect place for them. So they ended up settling in a small cow town called Abilene, Kansas. And at that time, it was a thriving cow town. And he was able to leverage his blacksmithing and repaired a lot of wagon wheels and farming ag equipment and those kind of things. And so settled down and really started to exploit his talents in blacksmithing. Um, and then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, my great grandfather, first of all, the founder is Robert Warren Exline. Then my great grandfather, William George Exline, he went by Will. He ended up ultimately moving the company to a small town called Kip, Kansas, which was south, primarily straight south of Abilene, and actually built a building and carried on his father's talents. He learned from his dad, and he really was the one that I think uh, created the product that Xline Inc. still offers today, really, and that is innovation, being able to take challenges on, find a solution. So he got heavily into reciprocating engines that generate electricity for communities around the state. Um, in the early 1900s, 1930s, when the natural gas industry started to really come on board, a lot of natural gas pipelines were being installed coming up out of the Gulf area. In fact, southwest Kansas, a lot of the Hugoton gas field. So there were a lot of pipelines being put in and compressor stations, and the gas compressors were driven by big recip engines. So he was taking his experience from the small engines in the municipalities, and he was doing a lot of repair on steam powered tractors and repairing a lot of ag equipment. Started to apply that to the larger gas compression engines and equipment there. So we've really grown in that industry. That's our primary industry today, is gas transmission, pipeline systems all across the U.S. My grandfather
Wow.
took it over, and that's when they moved to Salina. Um, they had had a couple of misfortunes in Kip. First, a tornado hit the facility there in Kip and almost wiped it out. But my great grandfather and grandfather rebuilt that. And then a couple years later, they had a big explosion in their shop and completely destroyed the shop. And that's when they decided to move to Salina, Kansas. So that was in the early 1940s. And it's kind of a neat story. There was a local banker here that really liked my granddad. So keep in mind, this is right after the Great Depression. People didn't have a lot of money, but a banker backed my grandfather and said, Bill, here is a checkbook. You do what you got to do. You write the checks and we'll cover them. So that's what really
Yeah.
allowed him to build the facility in Salina and begin to buy equipment they needed to really grow and expand. So he continued to grow it. And then my dad and uncles came in the around the 1950s, 1960s, continued to leverage the company. I think we'll talk about a little bit why I think we've been successful all these years, and I'll go over that.
Mhm.
But really carrying on the culture that really made the company successful, and then here I am today. I've been here 31 years, and continuing to primarily service the natural gas industry. We serve the mining industry, the plastics industry, uh, utility, power generation, um, we ag industry. We serve quite a number of industries today. We've really diversified, and that's really taken place under my leadership. So far more
Yeah.
diversified today, a little more. Um, we can stand up against economic slowdowns and things. But one nice thing about the natural gas industry, when the economy slows down, people still take hot showers, they cook, they heat their homes. So natural
Mhm.
gas isn't as impacted as much as some of the other retail type businesses and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's a huge history, and as I recall, it's about 150 years of business within Xline, and you've had so many different generations passing on this legacy for those 150 years. But I want to ask, what must stay intact for you to be successful over those 150 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a good answer to that, I believe. And you're right, we're celebrating 150 years this year. In
Hmm.
fact, we just had a big celebration with all of our members of the company and their families, and I addressed that directly. How in the world have we been able to survive a number of generations? Because I'm sure you guys in your line of business, it's usually the third generation that is the demise of most family businesses. And so there's three things that I believe have caused us to be so successful. And I'll start with the least important. However, it's still very important, obviously. And that's the people. Who you hire, your ability to select those people that work with the work ethic that you're looking for and committed, and I just think we've been real blessed with good people. Our tenure here, we have people that work almost 50 years at Exline before they retire. And every time I hire somebody, I tell them that the objective here is that if you come on board with Exline, you'll retire at Exline. That's the commitment we make, and we hope that they make the same commitment to us. So, number three, it's the people. Number two, and this is we're getting really important here, is that's the culture of the company. And I really feel like we have maintained a culture at Xline that is really one of the key ingredients of our success, and they're ones you're going to hear all the time, but you can talk about them, but you got to exercise what those, and they're really values. It's a culture of values, and it all comes down to honesty and respect and support. We have a list of obviously everybody has, not everybody, but most people have a vision and mission statement and a values and belief. And I have them here. We want people to be self motivated. They have to be open and communicate. Creative. We really want to encourage being creative and adding value to the company. People that are achievers, they're determined, and then it's important that we reward people for their superior performance. And I think we've been real successful, fortunately. And I think it's just happened, and maybe it's the way our family has brought up the next generation, and that is, commitment, respect, and honesty. So some real solid core values that continue. But I think when it comes to succession from one generation to the next is ownership. And as a generation passes on the business to the next family, I think you begin to lose that commitment to those core values. You get further and further away from the founder and what that founder really built the business around and why it became successful. That hasn't happened with the X lines. I think every time a new generation has stepped in, they have witnessed and understand those core values, and carry them on. And then that owner, the next generation, needs to really hold close to their heart the importance of what the company's been able to accomplish and the families that it's supported, and be proud of that, because again, the further away you get from the founder, the less important that becomes. So when you get into generation three, they've lost sight of that culture. They've lost sight of the value of the company and what it means. And they'll ultimately either sell the business, which happens a lot, or they'll just run it in the ground and take all the money out of it, and it just doesn't carry on. But I know my dad and uncles had a lot of opportunities to sell the business. I know I've had a lot of opportunities to sell it. But anytime I start to think about selling this family business, I get emotional. I just couldn't do it. The legacy of the company and the generations, it just, uh, I couldn't do it. And I really feel like my son Will possesses that same pride and that culture. And I have a lot of confidence we'll get to generation seven. We
Yeah.
hope.
I yeah. Well, I mean, it you said people, and then you said culture, and then was the last one ownership?
Ownership. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rob, when you talk about all that, I kind of see people in all of those because it starts with people, but then the people make the culture. And then that culture, the values that you had described. So you got honesty, respect, commitment, support, being creative. You're a very innovative company. You want to really focus on that. And then just recognizing those people, for their achievements. And that, I mean, the culture, it definitely involves people. But then you talk about ownership, and you had mentioned importance of you know of focusing on the families and what they have achieved, what they have accomplished, and the importance they put on people,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. And you have to focus on on the people, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than the individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
It goes to the culture. It goes to the entire business and everyone that you guys influence.
Exactly. I've seen a number of our competitors get bought up, by larger organizations, and they've been wonderful companies, great competitors, family businesses, and the new owners have ruined them. They Many of them don't even exist today. And just think of all the people that have worked so hard to keep a company like Exline alive and well and loyal and dedicated to it, and then to go sell it to somebody that has no appreciation for all the blood, sweat, and tears that go into keeping a company vibrant and doing well. To me, it's just a
Yeah.
sad ending. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, you really got to have the heart in it. There's got to be a deep emotional connection, it sounds like.
And caring about people, which is in your heart. You're right, Carl. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, Rob, I'm curious. Can you tell me how early or how long ago did you start planning out your own personal legacy with the business? How do you define who or what needed to be in place, say, for the transition from the fifth generation to the sixth generation, or to the next stage of Xline Inc.? What's your legacy in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question, Corbin. When you contacted me about maybe talking about what kind of a legacy that I wanted to leave, and then the question about how long have I been planning what that legacy is. Really, to be honest with you, there was no conscious thought on my part about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. I think I try to live that legacy every day. I guess
Mm.
it's part of me. Pride and obviously carry a lot of weight trying to get from the fifth generation to the sixth, right? You don't want to be the
Yeah.
demise. So you really focus on kind of the things I talked about. What have gotten us where we are? I guess, my legacy when I leave is that I leave it as in good a shape or better than when I got here. And from the values and the people, it was in tremendous great shape. So my focus is to continue that. I want to be remembered as somebody that cared about those people that helped Exline get to where it is. That I was supportive. I was an educator. I helped people grow their own careers. And when I hand this off to the next generation, like I said, I want it to be as good or better shape. So, uh, financially strong. I've pretty much committed myself to basically have the company with no debt when I retire. With a good leadership team, we have an executive leadership team. I'm the baby boomer, Jen, and when you have members that have worked for you for a long time, we're a bunch of baby boomers around here. So we've had a lot of retirements, which, every time we have a retirement, I tell people, I said, we don't live to work, we work to live. And you really start living once you retire. And that's where we hopefully get people. But with that brings challenges. So we've been working real hard to transition into new leadership. You want to bring in new, fresh ideas. So that's what we're working hard on today. So, my desire is just to have it in good shape when I retire so that my son or whoever is going to carry on the next generation has every tool in his tool chest to be able to do that. So, uh,
I really liked what you said there, Rob, at the start when it comes to leaving a legacy and, how did you start thinking about this? It's always been a part of you. This is something that you live every day. You lead by example. You modeled that behavior. And
Exactly.
when you do that, I mean, people catch on to that. They follow what you do, what you show them.
Yeah.
That speaks your truth.
Yeah. You know, I've heard this a few times, and I think it's great. It's not about the leader in a business, but it starts with leadership. And I think that's the leader's role is, uh, who are we? What are we about? What kind of people are we going to be? Um, and that's my job every day is to make sure that continues. You get somebody with a bad attitude or won't be a part of the team, and they can become a cancer real quick. And you just have to deal with those and take care of them. So that's right. It's every day.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. So, hey Rob, as we wrap up, I got one last question for you. I'm
Sure.
curious. You were talking about earlier the history of Exline Inc. and going into detail about how the purpose and the mission and the values of the business has carried on throughout the years. How has the company been able to maintain the ability to stay authentic to this purpose and to the mission, to all these values throughout all this time?
We try to, you call sharpen the saw. You've probably heard that. That's a Stephen Covey thing. We always, so we do strategic planning almost every year. And when I was in this group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, it was kind of interesting because some people truly believe in strategic planning, others don't. I'm one that does to a certain degree. Even you strategically plan, you have a plan, but you have to also be very flexible and open to change, and that might have to change on a dime. But through that process, we're always reflecting on what got us here, and what do we need to do now to continue. So I think reflecting back on what gets you here is important. We have a mission statement, we have a vision statement, and it's pretty short and simple. We want to keep it that way. Let's see. I probably should know it by heart, but um, our vision is real short. It just states by consistently focusing on our values and beliefs, we will become the preeminent company in the markets we serve. So it's written to not pigeonhole us into anything. But whatever we decide to do going forward, strategically, we want to make sure if we go there, we can be the best at it. We don't want to take on anything that we're only going to be so at. So um, that's our vision. And then our mission is to be profitable, which got to be profitable. We want to be a market driven company, which I think is unbelievably important. You need to know who your customer is, what their needs are, and that's market driven. And then delivering value that exceeds our customers' expectations. So I tell everybody when our customer gets our invoice and they look at it, first thing to their mind is that was a bargain. We
Mm,
exceeded our customers' expectations, and they're going to call us again and come back. So that's our mission is to are those things, and we review those not every strategic planning. Um, and I'd have to say, for the 31 years I've been here, that's almost identical to, and that those were not in place when I came to Salina, but we put those in place, and they've pretty much stayed that way the whole time. And we always feel like they speak clearly what it is we want to do. And then continually look at those values. So, um, I just think reflecting back every time, um, what got you where
yeah.
you are and what do you need going forward.
Yeah, it really goes back to reflection.
Yes,
And, whether a company has a strategic planning process or not, if they can look back and see where they have gone and where they were headed, that gives them a better idea of where to go for the future.
that's right.
What worked, what didn't
Didn't
work
work.
so
You're
well,
right, Carl.
you know?
We have
And
a
then
saying around here: not having a plan is planning to fail.
yeah.
So you got to have a plan. We always have these fun sayings. We're the boys that make the noise. We're big, we're bad, we're nationwide, and it's just those kind of sayings just kind of pump you up. Everybody rallies around those. We have a good time. I lay out these goals, and some are financial, some are objective, but there's one that always stays there. We want to have fun, and that is one of
Mm,
our objectives at Exline. Is whatever we do, we're going to have fun doing it, and people seem to rally around that. Our HR department does a real good job. We have a lot of community involvement, and we involve our members. We have cornhole contests. We do ping pong competition. During the workday, we have these things. So
wow.
people just, if they're having fun, they work hard for you and they won't leave. Um, so
Yeah.
have fun.
I really like that. The importance of just having fun, having a good time. And that goes back to what you're talking about earlier about culture, about people, about ownership. And, when you're talking about a legacy and reflecting all that, you know, it goes back to values and beliefs. How do we stick to those values and beliefs? And one important thing that you said earlier is how do you exceed customers' expectations? All of these things are so crucial in developing a lasting legacy. I think that's why you guys have lasted so long.
Yeah. The thing is, keep it going, right? Fingers crossed. It doesn't
Yeah.
just happen, Carl. And that's why my role is not to get so sucked into the day to day. We call that the what
The ground floor, maybe.
no,
The ground
no,
floor of
it's
what's
not coming
happening.
to me right now, but it's the daily craziness. We have another
Mm,
saying for it, but it's not coming to me right now. I've got to stay out of that. I got to have other people that can take care of those things, so I can stay focused on what you just summarized there, Carl. If I
mm,
see us slipping away from that, I've got to get in there and recover that. It's the ditches. Got to keep that
mm,
culture and everything. We got to stay between the ditches and not get off track there. I think for me that's the funnest part of owning and leading in a business are those things. It's all, and you said it a
mm.
number of times, Carl. I hate to beat it up, but it's all about people.
Yeah. And it's very encouraging to hear that you guys are so clear in your mission and your vision and your focus on people. But Rob, you've given us so much value today. Before we go, though, we want to give you the chance to share whatever you would like with our podcast community. What do you got?
Oh, geez, talked about a lot here. I think it comes down, like we said, comes down to people, and you have to remember that when you're a fairly large organization, that you're going to have people come to you and want to work for you from all different walks of life. And some people have had a tough road to hoe, right? You're kind of a product of your choices, but a lot of people don't have a lot of control over what choices have been brought to them. If they've had a good family life and parents, they probably have a lot better opportunities, some really good choices. Some people haven't had real good choices to choose from. So give people a chance, give them an opportunity. I think we've uncovered some what I would call diamonds in the rough that you give them a chance and they'll flourish. You can go out and hire the most experienced person out there and pay them a ton of money, and they're when they show up, they're only so. You've heard of Frank Carney, started Pizza Hut,
Mhm.
and I was fortunate enough to get to know him. He was in the Wichita YPO chapter, and he started Pizza Hut, sold it, basically went bankrupt, and then rebuilt the business again. And I think before he passed, he was involved in Papa John's Pizza. But he told me one day that guaranteed you'll only hire one really good member in your company out of 10. So you have to hire 10 people to find one good one. Um, I
Mhm.
think at Exline we've done better than that. I would suppose in the pizza business that's a little harder to do. But I guess my comment in parting is give people a chance. Really try to
Yeah.
get to know them, understand where they come from, and help them. It's very
Well,
rewarding. Um, so I'll part with that.
give people. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah,
Give people a chance. That is something I'm definitely going to remember. But thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
you bet. Thanks for having me, guys. I
Really
enjoyed it.
appreciate your time,
You
man.
bet.
Well, thank you all, our listeners, for joining. We really appreciate you for joining on this episode on leaving your legacy. Remember that you can check out all our episodes every other Tuesday, either on Apple, Google, or Spotify podcasts. We would love to have you on for the next episode.
And don't forget to check out Enturian.com. That's ENTURIAN.com. Take a look at exemplifyleadership.com as well. Carl and I are posting updates on the podcast across all of the social media platforms. We're also posting the video version of the podcast on YouTube. So if you want to check out the video version, go to Enturian.com. One more time. That's ENTURIAN.com. Last but not least, don't forget the one thing we want to keep reminding you is that alone we survive, but together we thrive. We'll see you on the next episode.